Hi, I'm GM Matthew Sadler.
And I'm WIM Natasha Regan. Welcome to this game from TCEC 18. It's a Bogo-Indian, and Leela plays a beautiful game, including a positional queen sacrifice, and then wins the game in a very fine style. So it's a sharp line in the Bogo-Indian, which includes the move h4 for white. And Leela plays a novelty with 14 queen c2 and gives away 2 pawns in order to get active pieces. Leela then continues to surprise us by giving up the bishop pair, and then, unpredicted by Stockfish, Leela gives away the queen for 2 pieces. Now, those 2 pieces are very actively placed, and Black finds that it can hardly move its pieces at all. So it's a queen and 2 pawns for 2 pieces up, but Black has very few moves, and Leela managed to develop a lot of mating threats so that Black has to give up the material, and Leela gets a fine win.
Yeah, it's probably Leela's best game of the Superfinal so far, and it is an absolutely stunning game. Let's have a look at it. So this was the TCEC position. I'll just go backwards a little bit just to show you how it all happened. I'm trying to think, I'm not sure we've had a Bogo-Indian before on this channel, so it might well be a first. And this is the Bogo-Indian. Normally very solid line for Black, but there are a couple of sharp lines, and this one got quite topical a few years ago. Castles a3, and instead of playing the typical Bogo bishop takes d2 check, Black plays bishop e7. What's the idea of this? Well, you've wasted the tempo, of course. You've gone bishop b4 to e7. So white gets in a3, which is always, at the very least, semi-useful. What you've done, though, you've committed the white knight to d2, whereas it would, much more naturally be on c3 behind a pawn on c4. So, you're hoping that this will cause white some inconvenience. And after e4, d5, e5, knight fd7, bishop d3, c5. Well, we can see again that white's had already committed a pawn to c4, so the centre is not incredibly solid like that. The d4 square is easy to attack, and yeah, the knight on d2 would much rather be on c3. So what does white do in this position? Well, white has this this very sharp idea, which was the last move of the TCEC book, and that's 9h4. And what's that doing? Well, it's exploiting the fact that you've got a pawn on e5, which has chased away the knight from f6. You're just threatening bishop takes h7 check and knight g5 and then queen h5. So the very typical attack there. And Black's
quite an aggressive line, this one.
Yeah, it's a very aggressive line. It's I looked at it a bit with Black somehow. I wasn't thinking, not sure about exposing myself to that. Well, I mean, if you calculate it, if you look, analyze it properly with engines, you can do it fine. But it doesn't feel intuitively. It doesn't feel like something you particularly want to do. So Black can play 2 things. There's h6, which is what Leela played in the reverse. It drew the game, was a little bit worse, but drew. But the sharpest line, and the line that Stockfish played, is the move g6. Kind of feels very, very risky, doesn't it? Because white's got a pawn on h4, and you're playing the move g6. What's Black?
It kind of invites white to play h5.
It invites white to play h5. I mean, what Black is arguing is that this white centre is not very solid. So whilst white is playing moves like this on the king side, you can hack away at the centre. For example, let's just have a look at some variations. h5. Many ideas here. C takes d4, queen c2, teeing up on g6, and now when I let my engine run for 6 hours to analyse, it came up with the rather amazing g5.
It's a surprising move.
A surprising move. Yeah, the idea is simply that yes, the h7 pawn is hanging, but you're in a way you're hiding then behind white's advanced h pawn. And well, again, you notice again that white's centre is not particularly solid, and you can destroy it in that way. It's a very sharp position. I'm not 100% sure about it, but it does look quite interesting. Another game that happened, I think it was a game of David Navarra's. I think David Navarra was white. I can't remember who was black. But black plays knight c5, and then there's various ideas. Bishop f1 has been played. Amazing bishop f1. Getting the bishop out of the way, so doesn't want to lose the two bishops, and looking to play b4 and then bishop d3 back again. So black can play a5, knight takes d4. I think this was one of the games, and then this move g5 again. You know, all totally crazy. It's I mean, it scored pretty well for white, h5, I have to say. But recently, some players, I think I've seen 10 games, all strong players. White's been doing something else, which I wonder is whether it's influenced by Leela, because this is Leela's choice, and I find it quite an amazing choice. Leela plays castles in this position, which feels well, yeah, it feels totally logical. I mean, you've played the move h4. It looks like you're setting yourself up for a big kingside attack, and then all of a sudden you just castle, move your rook off that h file, and just give black the opportunity to take the pawn. So what is the whole point of this? Well, I mean, first of all, you could say that h4 has got some sort of reaction. So the pawn has moved to g6, which has weakened the dark squares an awful lot. And well, you can exploit this. Well, we'll see it in the game. This bishop can come to h6. And when I was analysing with my engines, then a move like queen d2 eventually to h6 was also quite a common idea. The second thing is that well, if black takes this h pawn, first of all, it might end up a bit AlphaZero style. That white plays g3 and king g2 and rook h1, and exploits the open h file to bring an extra piece into the attack. But the other thing is that taking this pawn is going to cost 2 tempi. You've got to play bishop h4, and then you'll have to bring the bishop back to e7. And what black loses with those 2 tempi, it's nothing like an immediate mating attack or anything. But black does lose the opportunity to I say develop its queenside pieces to the most active squares. For example, the bishop on c8 would like to come to b7, for example. But if you're spending 2 tempi on bishop h4 to e7, you don't actually have that time. And, well, in the game, Stockfish develops it to the square d7, which is fine, but it's more passive. It's not really getting at white's position. It's just moving the piece, just moving a piece really to a slightly developed square. So in general, with those couple of extra tempi, white gets quite a long-lasting advantage, dynamic advantage. But it's not concrete, so it's very hard, really hard to sort of point to, yeah, this is the reason why it's so good or not. It's simply a lot of general factors. I think the other thing that you have to say, and we were always pointing this out in our AlphaZero lectures, is that AlphaZero was always very keen on starting attacks with a rook's pawn. But it also had a great insouciance to actually losing this pawn. The number of variations where, number of games where it just gives up this pawn, and you think, well, why? But the point about it is that a rook's pawn, it's a very low-cost way of launching an attack. Because if you lose this rook's pawn, your king's still fine. I mean, it's even got an escape square, actually. So, in some ways, it's even safer. Whereas, if you were launching an attack with your g-pawn, and you lose your g-pawn, then, well, the king's resulting position is horrific. So this is, just, as I said, a very low-cost way. I think that's how the NN see this rook's pawn, way of launching an attack. And, well, we'll see how it turns out in the game. In the game, white loses the h-pawn, but often you just don't realise that white's a pawn down. You don't really notice it with the rook's pawn gone. So, knight c6, knight b3, and now bishop h4. Stockfish grabs the pawn. Bishop h6, rook e8, and rook e1. And here Stockfish starts taking a decision. I'm not 100% sure it's the best. It's not easy though to find the best defensive plan for black. Stockfish started just opening up the centre, liquidating the tension in the centre, which is fine in terms of getting black's pieces developed, but it does also give a lot of space to white. White's got a space advantage, so in general you always feel that this certainly isn't going to harm white at all. And this was a novelty that Natasha talked about, queen c2. What's the idea of queen c2? Well, in a human game, white played rook c1, so the only previous human game from up to this position. Bishop e7 and queen d2. Sorry, not c takes d5. That's what Stockfish wanted to do. Queen d2. And here black played f6, which is risky, but it is quite a thematic idea. If you get rid of that pawn on e5, suddenly your kingside dark squares are not as as weak as they were. And white loses some part of its central advantage. So this move queen c2 is directed against the move f6, because you could take with a bishop on g6. It's also directed against a move like b6, for example, intending bishop b7, because you could go c takes d5. So it's
also, I guess you can put your rook on d1 rather than c1, and you're lining up against that queen.
Exactly. I think it's a more logical form of development. Although in my engine games, white also came up with queen d2 in this position, bishop e7 and queen f4, which turned out to be pretty dangerous as well. With knight g5 threats and c takes d5 and e6. This also turned out dangerous, but queen c2 is a very good positional move. I think Leela's main move in this position was to play a6. This was what Leela wanted, and was looking at this idea. It looks very risky to me, I have to say. This was the point. In my engine games, in this position, black ended up with an awful lot of problems, and it's not surprising. I mean, black's a pawn up, this d5 pawn is weak, and the king's just not very well placed. At the very least, it's it's excellent compensation for the. Yeah, it is pretty excellent compensation for the for the pawn, and this was the idea. Bishop g5, trying to swap off the knights. Bishop c4, attacking the pawn on d5. I think did one of my Stockfish games, engine games, went like this actually. Which was really quite difficult for black. This king is horrifically open. So had it proceed, rook e5, bishop d5, rook d5, queen b3 with a pin, rook takes, and actually the queen was lost there. I think rook d8 check. I managed to just lose the exchange, but that was just completely gone. So this is very, very dangerous. I'm not. I didn't really find a comfortable path for black here. Knight b6 was another idea. Simply trying to keep things tight, not open the centre. But white can play a move like c5 and bishop b5, and again this looks very pleasant for white. I mean, white is going to be a pawn down always, but it's like a kind of a French type position, one of those Milner-Barry gambits or something, where you give up a pawn but get a bind like this. It's still going to be quite tricky for black to defend. So Stockfish played the very reasonable d takes c4, bishop takes c4, and knight b6. I mean, now some very NN moves really, but surprising moves, but all based around nothing to do with material, just ignoring the material and just getting your pieces onto great squares. So rook d1, bishop d7, and now not knight bd4 that Stockfish was expecting. Actually, even after quite long periods of analysis, it was still expecting knight bd4, but Leela went knight c5. And the point of this move is to attack b7 and also to bring the knight round to e4, where it attacks d6 and f6. Very logical, but you're 2 pawns down still. It's quite a lot of material there. Rook c8 was played, b4, and now knight takes c4. Wonder slightly about c4. I wonder whether bishop e7 was maybe more accurate here. You only say that when you see the idea in the game simply, which is absolutely stunning. But this might have been a little bit more sensible. Stockfish took on c4, which looks very, very reasonable, getting the bishop pair. Queen c4, and then brings the bishop back into the fold. And I mean, this is a very critical position, really. I think Stockfish was expecting white to take on b7 here, just get one of the pawns back, and maybe you'll get the other pawn back later. But Leela came up with a fantastic idea. Actually, I think all the NNs came up with this idea. So it's really something to do with with their particular skills that enable them to see very deeply into this position. Played knight e4. So, logical positional move, looking for f6, looking for d6, but there are quite a few discovered attacks on the queen, so that definitely gets you worried a little bit. Knight takes d5 is one obvious one, but that's very easy refutation. Just queen d4, takes, and you're threatening d7, and you're threatening g7 as well. So that's not very good, but there is another move. Which we'll have a look at here, which is knight takes b4, and this looks
an attack on the queen.
Indeed, and this looks quite powerful. Stockfish was expecting queen d4 and then knight d5, and well, black's 2 pawns up, and has managed to get a great square for the knight, solidified. Might well end up losing the exchange somehow, but then it doesn't really matter. You've got 2 pawns for the exchange. But the move that Leela, that Stockfish wanted, that I think that Ali wanted as well, it's this incredible sacrifice queen takes b4. It kind of makes sense, I guess, of all the moves that White's been playing, just h4, which, gave this g6 weakness, bishop h6, this knight c5 to e4, and now this move queen b4, it just makes this game just incredibly beautiful and thematic. And after bishop takes b4, a takes b4, then, well, we start to realize that there are some problems. But the normal engines take a very long time to work out how bad this is. The move they all want to play at first is a very logical one. It's rook c4, just defending the pawn on d4. But here we follow up with knight f6 check, king h8, and knight g5. And, White has got, as Natasha said, just a knight and bishop for a queen and 2 pawns. But, this knight and bishop here are just so powerful. They completely restrict the black king. And what's the threat? Well, the idea is if you play rookie...
Knight takes f7.
Knight f7 was the threat with mate. And something like rook e7, we can just play rook d3. And we are simply going to go rook h3 and bishop g7 check and deliver mate. And it's incredibly hard for black to deal with this. For example, bishop e8, it wasn't knight e4. No, I think knight e4 was Leela's main line, but actually knight h7 looks very, very simple here. Rook c3, rook e4, rook h4. This was one of my engine games. So another rook sacrifice on top. And we're just going to play knight g5, or even bishop f4, and then knight g5 check out of the way. King g7, knight g5, and rook h7 check, and is just coming in. What happened in the game? I think they gave away some pieces to try and stop it. Rook there, f4, bishop d7, knight e4, a very nice little move there. Rook e8 to try and stop White, because White's threat here was to play g4 and g5 with checkmate. So then the desperation starts, but actually even the desperation isn't enough to stop a mate with g3 check. I mean, there's a huge variety of mating ideas here, and amazingly enough, they all seem to work. I mean, it's just incredible. I think Queen E7 was another engine game that I had. I think White won pretty much every game here, from the position after the Queen sack in my engine games. So, I mean, it really is completely winning. Rook D3, Bishop A4, Rook H3, D3 was played, Knight H7, and then this gorgeous move, Knight F8. I like that very much. Bishop D1, trying to block on H5. It's just giving up a piece. Rook D1, Queen B4. And now maybe if you want a little tactical test, you can have a look to see how White mates in about 4 or 5. And it's quite gorgeous, actually. It's Bishop F4 check, so stopping the Rook from coming across to H4, so blocking that. King G7, and then it looks like the King's kind of escaping. Rook H7 check, we just go King F8. and bishop h6 check, king e7, and the king is safe. But there's this beautiful little idea. I don't think I've seen this mating pattern before. Knight e6 check, king's got to take, only move, and now we go rook h7 check and bishop h6 mate. And knight e6 check, that just cleared the second rank so that the rook's covering the king's escape square on e7, which is very, very nice indeed. So this move rook c4 doesn't seem to work. But then, you know, the white plan is very, very clear. You know, just knight f6, knight g5, rook over to the h file. You know, it's just a very simple plan. And whatever black does, it doesn't really seem to. Nothing seems to work.
Those two pieces really are stronger than the queen.
It's amazing. I mean, just absolutely amazing. I mean, again, you know, from a human point of view, you see it and you see the holes and you say, yeah, that'll be dangerous. But you know, winning, just completely winning. You know, it's just. I think it's been one of these things about the Superfinal that's been so astounding. I mean, you have this example from Leela where it just sees, you know, from way off that this positional structure is just winning, and obviously we've had it loads with Stockfish as well. You know, it's going for attacks, and you say, yeah, pretty dangerous, but it's already at plus 10 or something. You know, it's already calculated that the win is there. It's really, you know, chess from another level. Just just before we carry on, I mean, Leela actually thought that the position wasn't that really bad for black, really. That a5 was stronger, and after b5 you play knight b4. The idea being if queen b4 now, then I can play a takes b4. I don't have to give up my my dark squared bishop. And after queen d4, knight c2, Leela was looking at this sort of position, where you're playing an ending where you've got a rook and pawn for the two pieces, and well, white's pawns, queenside pawns are just a little bit weak, you know. So rook a4, bishop e3. It was tending to think that that white was better, but not yet winning. And well, you do see the engines holding, you know, quite a few of these types of positions. So it, you know, I think black still had decent chances. I hadn't seen this idea. I was looking at a move like knight b8 was the move I was looking at, just trying to play bishop c6. Exchange off that knight on e4 and then get the knight developed again. But it was turning out quite awkward for black here. For example, if you play a move like rook c4 takes knight d6, you know, it's quite unpleasant. All these weaknesses and you know, a big passed d pawn as well. Knight's not very well placed. Tricky. It's not really very easy. So, but anyway, back to the game. Knight takes b4, queen takes. f5 was played by Stockfish, hoping that white gets tempted to play e takes f6 en passant, and well, just get a pawn on f6 rather than a piece. Leela is not tempted, of course. Takes, king h8, rook d4, and this is the other point of the whole attack. So, by playing f7 to f5, you know, black does get the possibility to defend h7 with a rook on the second rank. But unfortunately, in this position, black is completely tied up. It needs the queen, the rook, and well, it needs the queen and the two rooks to defend the bishop on d7, because that bishop on d7 is the only barrier really against invasion on the d file.
No moves at all.
The king has got no moves at all, and well, if you're tied down on those squares to this bishop,
the three major pieces are all tied to the defense of the bishop.
Exactly, you know. So yeah, just by a knight and two rooks, you know, then well, black's just got nothing to do. I mean, that's the upshot of it. The only question is, how does white actually win this? And well, this is a first nice move. If black plays a6, then b6 follows, chasing the rook away from the defense. So so b6 is played, but now, well, if you play a6 later, just b takes a6, and yeah, you know, what is black doing? This pawn is just going to be you can't move the queen away to capture it because the bishop on d7 is hanging. So now it's just a question of how is Leela going to finish off. Leela shuffles around just a little bit, just trying to work out the optimal position for its pieces for when it wants to do when it eventually does the stuff it knows it wants to do. f4, is a very good move, solidifying the white pawn on e5 and also the white kingside as well. And after rook b7, Leela decides, after remarkably little shuffling, that it's time to finish off the game. Has to be quite precisely calculated, this, but it does work very well. Knight takes d7, so the knight's just going to move away back to f6, and then the rook's going to come to d8. You notice how Leela waited, that black played rook b7 before taking on e6, and that this rook's very passive here. If it was on c7, it could be a little bit more disruptive. King g8 and knight f6. Seems like black's got a little bit of a chance here. Could maybe play rook takes f6. But then we've got rook d8 check. Again, was very important that the white waited before playing knight takes e6 until the black rook was on b7, where it's not protecting the queen. Rook f8, bishop f8, and I mean, this looks dangerous again, but you think, is this really winning? But the answer is actually yes, it's really actually winning. Check here, rook d8, and well, we've got a big threat of bishop g5 check. And how big is that threat? Well, you'll see what the idea is. e6, and this is going to end up being mate. King g7, rook g8 was the end of one of my engine games. Yeah, I find it quite incredible, you know, just you know, two pieces for the queen, and all these mating attacks just really seem to be, you know, mathematically correct. You know, they're just working completely. King f7 is very nice. Rook d8, queen c5, and then this amazing idea, knight h7. And what's the point of that? Well, you might be able to spot that if black plays a move like queen f2, threatening queen h4 check, then we've got this stunning mate here, and bishop f8 check, which is a very unusual mate. You know, black's rooks. Look how hopeless those black rooks are, and how powerful those two pieces are. Really amazing. So knight h7 is a very powerful move. Knight g5 check is coming in. Rook f8 check is also a possible threat. Even bishop f8 as well, actually. So black plays rook e8, e6 check. All white's units being used here. Check, knight g5, and rook f8 check. And well, what can black do? King e7 allows rook f7 check, when at the very least afterwards we'll take the rook on b7. So black plays queen f8, bishop f8. And the material is not so bad here. I mean, rook and pawn for two pieces. But the big problem is that the black king is in a complete cage. So you can't move the rook away from e6, where it's attacked, because of rook d6 check. And mate.
Those two rooks are still not active.
Those two rooks are still awful. So rook c7, and now Leela will just shuffles around just a little bit, just waiting. Stockfish for now doesn't want to move its rook off the second rank, but eventually it weakens. I mean, you know, knight e6 at some stage is just going to be winning for white. It plays rook c4, but now you notice that there's another mating pattern. When the rook moves off the second rank, then, well, rook f7 check is a threatened mate. Bishop g7 is another threatened mate. So rook e3 check, rook f4, breaking that up, but king e3, bishop e7 check, king e5, king f3, and here the evaluations of both engines were so high that the TCEC declared a win for white. 2 extra pieces, and
there was a queen for 2 pieces, and white managed to keep both the pieces.
Exactly, and take the queen. Astonishing, isn't it? It's really, really astonishing. Yeah, I mean, I thought this was a beautiful game. I think, you know, it's a fantastic demonstration of the differences between the two engines, and you know, we're seeing lots of amazing Stockfish attacks in this super final, but we're also seeing some, you know, some incredible bits of judgment from Leela as well, and certainly this idea of just castling, giving away this rook's pawn for long-term play, reasoning that because it's a rook's pawn, it doesn't really matter that much. But it'll cost black a couple of tempi to grab it. And of course, if black doesn't grab the pawn, then h5 will be played at some stage eventually. You know, and then, you know, all the other surrounding moves that make it all work. a move like queen c2, just this move rook d1, allowing black to get the extra advantage then on top of his 2 pawns of the bishop pair, and then this move knight c5. Not rushing to grab back material, but transferring the pieces onto good squares, and then this judgment. Just to you can just give up the queen like this, and I mean here obviously the d4 pawn is doomed, but here black's even got queen and 3 pawns for 2 pieces. Massive material advantage, but black's just completely hopeless there. It's yeah, really amazing. I mean, it's very shogi-like, I have to say, because in shogi you've got these big pieces. That's the rook and the bishop in shogi, and you often give them up for smaller pieces, and those smaller pieces can wriggle their way into the opponent's position. And this feels very much like it. You're giving black this big colossus of a queen, but this the white pieces can the knight on f6, knight on g5, bishop h6. They really wriggle their way into black's position and cause appalling problems.
Yes, and the bit where the second rank is opened for the rook right near the end is very shogi-like too.
Yeah, no, it's very nice indeed. I mean, it's a really beautiful game, and well, I mean, the Superfinal isn't going great for Leela. I think it's 19-14 down now in wins, and we're approaching game 80, so 5 down with only about 20 to play, 10 openings, of course. Unlikely that Leela's going to be able to keep the Superfinal.
Is there a book on this? Does like Ladbrokes let you place bets on this?
I don't know, actually. I'm sure they would, wouldn't they? I'm sure.
Surprise.
You can.
I'd say the odds for Leela are pretty long at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. No, it looks. I mean, Leela wins games, but Stockfish often, Stockfish is winning the reverse. I think of the mini matches, Stockfish has won. I think was it 9, and 9. Yeah, 9 and Leela's won 4, something like that. So. Yeah, I mean, it's just it's Stockfish's season this season, which is it's playing wonderfully as well. But the great thing about it is that neither of these machines are invulnerable. Despite really playing so fantastically, Stockfish has still lost 14 games. So it's really great how these two different type of machines can expose each other's weaknesses. But there we are. We're going to keep on covering lots of games. So do keep tuned to our channel. If you haven't subscribed,
then please subscribe.
Indeed. If you fancy a good book about fantastic AB against NN engines, then do take a look at Game Changer, our fantastic book, always worth a read. So, otherwise, keep well, keep safe, and keep watching. Thanks very much. Thanks very much.